May 1st, 19 Dean is home. He came to his sister's yesterday, and this evening he was here, and we walked in the garden, up and down the sundial walk, and talked. It was splendid to have him back, with his mysterious green eyes and his nice mouth. We had a long conversation. We talked of Algiers and the transmigration of souls, and of being cremated, and of profiles. Dean says I have a good profile, pure Greek. I always like Dean's compliments. "Star o' morning, how you have grown," he said. "I left a child last autumn, and I find a woman." I will be 14 in 3 weeks, and I am tall for my age. Dean seems to be glad of this, quite unlike Aunt Laura, who always sighs when she lengthens my dresses and thinks children grow up too fast. "So goes time by," I said, quoting the motto on the sundial, and feeling quite sophisticated. "You are almost as tall as I am," he said, and then added, bitterly, "To be sure, Jorback Priest is of no very stately height." I have always shrunk from referring to his shoulder in any way, but now I said, "Dean, please don't sneer at yourself like that, not with me at least. I never think of you as Jorback." Dean took my hand and looked right into my eyes as if he were trying to read my very soul. "Are you sure of that, Emily? Don't you often wish that I wasn't lame and crooked?" "For your sake I do," I answered. "But as far as I am concerned, it doesn't make a bit of difference, and never will." "And never will." Dean repeated the words emphatically. "If I were sure of that, Emily, if I were only sure of that." "You can be sure of it," I declared quite warmly. I was vexed because he seemed to doubt it, and yet something in his expression made me feel a little uncomfortable. It suddenly made me think of the time he rescued me from the cliff on Malvern Bay, and told me my life belonged to him since he had saved it. I don't like the thought of my life belonging to anyone but myself. Not anyone, even Dean, much as I like him. And, in some ways, I like Dean better than anyone in the world. When it got darker, the stars came out, and we studied them through Dean's splendid new field glasses. It was very fascinating. Dean knows all about the stars. It seems to me he knows all about everything. But when I said so, he said, "There is one secret I do not know. I would give everything else I do know for it. One secret. Perhaps I shall never know it. The way to win. The way to win." "What?" I asked curiously. "My heart's desire," said Dean dreamily, looking at a shimmering star that seemed to be hung on the very tip of one of the 3 princesses. "It seems now as desirable and unattainable as a gem-like star, Emily. But who knows? I wonder what it is Dean wants so much." May 4th, 19 Dean brought me a lovely portfolio from Paris, and I have copied my favorite verse from The Fringed Gentian on the inside of the cover. I will read it over every day, and remember my vow to climb the Alpine path. I begin to see that I will have to do a good bit of scrambling, though I once expected, I think, to soar right up to that far-off goal on shining wings. Mr. Carpenter has banished that fond dream. "Dig in your toes and hang on with your teeth. That's the only way," he says. Last night in bed, I thought out some lovely titles for the books I'm going to write in the future. A Lady of High Degree, true to faith and vow. Oh, rare pale Margaret. I got that from Tennyson. The Cast of Vere de Vere, ditto. And A Kingdom by the Sea. Now, if I can only get ideas to match the titles. I am writing a story called The House Among the Rowans. Also a very good title, I think. But the love talk still bothers me. Everything of the kind I write seems so stiff and silly the minute I write it down that it infuriates me. I asked Dean if he could teach me how to write it properly, because he promised long ago that he would. But he said I was too young yet. Said it in that mysterious way of his, which always seems to convey the idea that there is so much more in his words than the mere sound of them expresses. I wish I could speak so significantly, because it makes you very interesting. This evening after school, Dean and I began to read the Alhambra over again, sitting on the stone bench in the garden. That book always makes me feel as if I had opened a little door and stepped straight into fairyland. How I would love to see the Alhambra, I said. We will go to see it sometime, together, said Dean. Oh, that would be lovely, I cried. Do you think we can ever manage it, Dean? Before Dean could answer, I heard Teddy's whistle in Lofty John's bush. The dear little whistle of 2 short high notes and 1 long low one, that is, our signal. Excuse me, I must go. Teddy's calling me, I said. Must you always go when Teddy calls? Asked Dean. I nodded and explained. He only calls like that when he wants me especially, and I have promised I will always go if I possibly can. I want you especially, said Dean. I came up this evening on purpose to read the Alhambra with you. Suddenly, I felt very unhappy. I wanted to stay with Dean dreadfully, and yet I felt as if I must go to Teddy. Dean looked at me piercingly. Then he shut up the Alhambra. Go, he said. I went, but things seemed spoiled somehow. May 10th, 19 I have been reading 3 books Dean lent me this week. One was like a rose garden, very pleasant, but just a little too sweet. And one was like a pine wood on a mountain, full of balsam and tang. I loved it, and yet it filled me with a sort of despair. It was written so beautifully. I can never write like that, I feel sure. And one, it was just like a pigsty. Dean gave me that one by mistake. He was very angry with himself when he found it out, angry and distressed. Star, Star, I would never have given you a book like that. My confounded carelessness, forgive me. That book is a faithful picture of one world, but not your world, thank God, nor any world you will ever be a citizen of. Star, promise me you will forget that book. I'll forget it if I can, I said. But I don't know if I can. It was so ugly. I have not been so happy since I read it. I feel as if my hands were soiled somehow, and I couldn't wash them clean. And I have another queer feeling, as if some gate had been shut behind me, shutting me into a new world I don't quite understand or like, but through which I must travel. Tonight, I try to write a description of Dean in my Jimmy book of character sketches, but I didn't succeed. What I wrote seemed like a photograph, not a portrait. There is something in Dean that is beyond me. Dean took a picture of me the other day with his new camera, but he wasn't pleased with it. It doesn't look like you, he said. But of course, one can never photograph starlight. Then he added, quite sharply, I thought, Tell that young imp of a Teddy Kent to keep your face out of his pictures. He has no business to put you into every one he draws." "He doesn't," I cried. "Why, Teddy never made but the one picture of me, the one Aunt Nancy stole." I said it quite viciously and unashamed, for I've never forgiven Aunt Nancy for keeping that picture. "He's got something of you in every picture," said Dean stubbornly. "Your eyes, the curve of your neck, the tilt of your head, your personality. That's the worst. I don't mind your eyes and curves so much, but I won't have that cub putting a bit of your soul into everything he draws. Probably he doesn't know he's doing it, which makes it all the worse." "I don't understand you," I said, quite haughtily. "But Teddy is wonderful. Mr. Carpenter says so." And Emily of New Moon echoes it. "Oh, the kid has talent. He'll do something some day, if his morbid mother doesn't ruin his life. But let him keep his pencil and brush off my property." Dean laughed as he said it, but I held my head high. I am not anybody's property, not even in fun, and I never will be. May 12th, 19 Aunt Ruth and Uncle Wallace and Uncle Oliver were all here this afternoon. I like Uncle Oliver, but I am not much fonder of Aunt Ruth and Uncle Wallace than I ever was. They held some kind of family conclave in the parlor with Aunt Elizabeth and Aunt Laura. Cousin Jimmy was allowed in, but I was excluded, although I feel perfectly certain that it had something to do with me. I think Aunt Ruth didn't get her own way either, for she snubbed me continually all through supper and said I was growing weedy. Aunt Ruth generally snubs me, and Uncle Wallace patronizes me. I prefer Aunt Ruth's snubs because I don't have to look as if I liked them. I endured them to a certain point, and then the lid flew off. Aunt Ruth said to me, "Emily, don't contradict," just as she might have spoken to a mere child. I looked her right in the eyes and said coldly, "Aunt Ruth, I think I am too old to be spoken to in that fashion now." "You are not too old to be very rude and impertinent," said Aunt Ruth, with a sniff. "And if I were in Elizabeth's place, I would give you a sound box on the ear, miss." I hate to be Emily'd and missed and sniffed at. It seems to me that Aunt Ruth has all the Murray faults and none of their virtues. Uncle Oliver's son, Andrew, came with him and is going to stay for a week. He is 4 years older than I am. May 19th, 19 This is my birthday. I am 14 years old today. I wrote a letter from myself at 14 to myself at 24, sealed it up, and put it away in my cupboard to be opened on my 24th birthday. I made some predictions in it. I wonder if they will have come to pass when I open it. Aunt Elizabeth gave me back all Father's books today. I was so glad. It seems to me that a part of Father is in those books. His name is in each one in his own handwriting, and the notes he made on the margins. They seem like little bits of letters from him. I have been looking over them all the evening, and Father seems so near to me again, and I feel both happy and sad. One thing spoiled the day for me. In school, when I went up to the blackboard to work a problem, everybody suddenly began to titter. I cannot imagine why. Then I discovered that someone had pinned a sheet of foolscap to my back, on which was printed in big black letters, "Emily Bird Starr, authoress of The Four-Legged Duck." They laughed more than ever when I snatched it off and threw it in the coal scuttle. It infuriates me when anyone ridicules my ambitions like that. I came home angry and sore. But when I had sat on the steps of the summer house and looked at one of Cousin Jimmy's big purple pansies for 5 minutes, all my anger went away. Nobody can keep on being angry if she looks into the heart of a pansy for a little while. Besides, the time will come when they will not laugh at me. Andrew went home yesterday. Aunt Elizabeth asked me how I liked him. She never asked me how I liked anyone before. My likings were not important enough. I suppose she is beginning to realize that I am no longer a child. I said I thought he was good and kind and stupid and uninteresting. Aunt Elizabeth was so annoyed she would not speak to me the whole evening. Why? I had to tell the truth, and Andrew is. May 21st, 19 Old Kelly was here today for the first time this spring, with a load of shining new tins. He brought me a bag of candies as usual, and teased me about getting married, also as usual. But he seemed to have something on his mind, and when I went to the dairy to get him the drink of milk he had asked for, he followed me. "Girl, dear," he said mysteriously, "I met Jarback Priest in the lane. Does he be coming here much?" I cocked my head at the Murray angle. "If you mean Mr. Dean Priest," I said, "he comes often. He is a particular friend of mine." Old Kelly shook his head. "Girl, dear, I warned ye. Niver be after saying I didn't warn ye. I told ye the day I took ye to Priest Pond niver to marry a priest. Didn't I now?" "Mr. Kelly, you're too ridiculous," I said, angry, and yet feeling it was absurd to be angry with old Jock Kelly. "I'm not going to marry anybody. Mr. Priest is old enough to be my father, and I am just a little girl he helps in her studies." Old Kelly gave his head another shake. "I know the priests, girl dear, and when they do be after setting their minds on a thing, ye might as well try to turn the wind. This Jarback now, they tell me he's had his eye on ye ever since he fished ye up from the Malvern rocks. He's just biding his time till ye get old enough for courting. They tell me he's an infidel, and it's well known that when he was being christened, he raged up and clawed the spectacles off of the minister. So what would ye expect? I needn't be telling ye he's lame and crooked. Ye can see that for yourself. Take foolish old Kelly's advice and cut loose while there's time. Now don't be looking at me like the Murrays, girl dear. Sure, and it's for your own good I do be spaking." I walked off and left him. One couldn't argue with him over such a thing. I wish people wouldn't put such ideas into my mind. They stick there like burrs. I won't feel as comfortable with Dean for weeks now, though I know perfectly well every word old Kelly said was nonsense. After old Kelly went away, I came up to my room and wrote a full description of him in a Jimmy book. Ilsa has got a new hat trimmed with clouds of blue tulle and red cherries, with big blue tulle bows under the chin. I did not like it and told her so. She was furious and said I was jealous and hasn't spoken to me for 2 days. I thought it all over. I knew I was not jealous, but I concluded I had made a mistake. I will never again tell anyone a thing like that. It was true, but it was not tactful. I hope Ilsa will have forgiven me by tomorrow. I miss her horribly when she is offended with me. She's such a dear thing and so jolly and splendid when she isn't vexed. Teddy is a little squiffy with me too just now. I think it is because Jeff North walked home with me from prayer meeting last Wednesday night. I hope that is the reason. I like to feel that I have that much power over Teddy. I wonder if I ought to have written that down. But it's true. If Teddy only knew it, I have been very unhappy and ashamed over that affair. At first, when Jeff singled me out from all the girls, I was quite proud of it. It was the very first time I had had an escort home. And Jeff is a town boy, very handsome and polished, and all the older girls in Blair Water are quite foolish about him. So I sailed away from the church door with him, feeling as if I had grown up all at once. But we hadn't gone far before I was hating him. He was so condescending. He seemed to think I was a simple little country girl who must be quite overwhelmed with the honor of his company. And that was true at first. That was what stung me, to think I had been such a little fool. He kept saying, "Really, you surprise me," in an affected, drawling kind of way whenever I made a remark. And he bored me. He couldn't talk sensibly about anything, or else he wouldn't try to with me. I was quite savage by the time we got to New Moon. And then that insufferable creature asked me to kiss him. I drew myself up. Oh, I was Murray clear through at that moment, all right. I felt I was looking exactly like Aunt Elizabeth. "I do not kiss young men," I said disdainfully. Jeff laughed and caught my hand. "Why, you little goose, what do you suppose I came home with you for?" he said. I pulled my hand away from him and walked into the house. But before I did that, I did something else. I slapped his face. Then I came up to my room and cried with shame over being insulted and having been so undignified and resenting it. Dignity is a tradition of New Moon, and I felt that I had been false to it. But I think I surprised Jeff North in right good earnest. May 24th, 19 Jenny String told me today that Jeff North told her brother that I was a regular spitfire and he had had enough of me. Aunt Elizabeth has found out that Jeff came home with me and told me today that I would not be trusted to go alone to prayer meeting again. May 25th, 19 I am sitting here in my room at twilight. The window is open, and the frogs are singing of something that happened very long ago. All along the middle garden walk, the gay folk are holding up great fluted cups of ruby and gold and pearl. It is not raining now, but it rained all day, a rain scented with lilacs. I like all kinds of weather, and I like rainy days. Soft, misty, rainy days, when the wind woman just shakes the tops of the spruces gently. And wild, tempestuous, streaming rainy days. I like being shut in by the rain. I like to hear it thudding on the roof, and beating on the panes and pouring off the eaves, while the wind woman skirls like a mad old witch in the woods and through the garden. Still, if it rains when I want to go anywhere, I growl just as much as anybody. An evening like this always makes me think of that spring Father died 3 years ago, and that dear little old house down at Maywood. I've never been back since. I wonder if anyone is living in it now, and if Adam and Eve and the rooster pine and the praying tree are just the same. And who is sleeping in my old room there? And if anyone is loving the birches and playing with the wind woman in the spruce barrens. Just as I wrote the words, spruce barrens, an old memory came back to me. One spring evening when I was 8 years old, I was running about the barrens playing hide and seek with a wind woman, and I found a little hollow between two spruces that was just carpeted with tiny bright green leaves when everything else was still brown and faded. They were so beautiful that the flash came as I looked at them. It was the very first time it ever came to me. I suppose that is why I remember those little green leaves so distinctly. No one else remembers them. Perhaps no one else ever saw them. I have forgotten other leaves, but I remember them every spring, and with each remembrance, I feel again the wonder moment they gave me.